They said the Vorkai had never lost a ground campaign, not once, which not in 400 years of expansion across 11 star systems. They had a word for it, Vrethkon, which translated roughly into something between inevitability and gravity. The way a stone falls, which the way a sun burns out. The Vorkai didn't, in my opinion, win wars. Wars, well, simply ended when they arrived. And so when Fleet Admiral Senarok received the preliminary report on the human engagement at Theta Corridor, he read it twice. Then he called in his senior xenobiologist, who read it once, set it down carefully on the desk, and said, "This isn't possible." Senarok agreed. He filed the report anyway. The thing about coming home was that home didn't know you'd left. Yeah, Mara Vasquez stood outside the double doors of Keswick Falls High School at 7:42 in the morning and felt nothing she had words for anymore. The doors, I think, were the same pale blue they'd always been. Someone had taped, actually, a poster for the winter formal to the inside glass, glittery snowflakes, a font that screamed enthusiasm, and the kid who taped it had left air bubbles in the corners. Mara could see them from 10 feet away. Small failures, no. One thought to fix. She shifted the weight of her bag. 18 months ago, she had shipped out under the Interstellar Defense Accord, one of the first wave of human volunteers, barely 17, her parents' signatures on the consent form still smelling like her mother's hand lotion. She had told everyone she'd be back before junior year ended. She was back, and junior year had kept going without her. The doors opened from the inside. A freshman walked out, earbuds in, not looking up, and nearly walked into her. He corrected, mumbled something, kept walking. Mara didn't flinch. That was new. Third period was AP History, which, by some cosmic joke she didn't have the energy to appreciate, was covering the early stages of the Vorkai First Contact. Mr. Delacourt had a projected map on the smartboard. Concentric circles of Vorkai territorial expansion rendered in amber and red. 11 systems well in 4 centuries, he was saying. The well, a Vorkai model of expansion, relies on what xenostrategists call asymmetric species valuation, their assessment of a civilization's military potential before committing resources. They essentially grade you. Mara sat in the 3rd row. Pretty much her seat, still hers apparently because no, one had taken it while she was gone. "They graded us pretty low," said Tyler Marsh from the back. He had the particular confidence of someone who had never had a reason to lose it. "Ma, that's why they attacked the Theta Corridor, right? They thought we'd fold." "Correct," Delacourt said. "Plus, initial Vorkai assessment rated humanity at roughly Class 4 on the hegemony scale. For context, that's the same rating as the Polari, who surrendered after a 3-week orbital blockade without a single ground engagement." Mara was looking at the map. Honestly, the amber circles, the way they stopped, and right there, she thought, right at that line. She knew why they stopped. She had been standing at that line. She didn't say this. Lunch was loud. Well, in the specific way cafeterias were always loud, a wall of noise that had no direction, no meaning, just volume for its own sake. Mara carried her tray to the edge table by the windows. She sat with her back to the wall. Old habit, which she didn't think about it until she was already seated, and then she thought, there it is. "Hey, Vasquez?" She looked up. Plus, Priya Okonkwo, who had been in her biology class the year before, who had borrowed Mara's colored pens exactly once and returned them in the wrong order. Priya stood there with her own tray, head tilted in that way people tilt their heads. When they're doing the mental math of is this weird, should I ask, is she okay? "Yeah," Mara said. "You're back." "Seems like." Priya sat down without being invited, which Mara respected more than she would have a year and a half ago. Honestly, no negotiation. I mean, just a decision. "People said you went to, like, the actual war," Priya said. Theta corridor, yeah. That's... Priya stopped, started again. Actually. Cousin watched the feed when they released it. The battle footage. She said it looked... I know what it looked like. Silence. Not the bad kind, which Priya seemed to understand the difference. Are you okay? She finally asked. Quietly. Plus, the kind of quietly that meant she actually wanted an honest answer. Mara thought about that. She thought about what okay meant and whether it applied to her anymore the way it used to apply to things. This water-like is okay to drink. This road is okay to cross. Some kind of pass/fail system she no longer had the rubric for. I'm functional, she said, and Priya nodded like that was enough. It was. The Vorkai called the human soldiers Velsharik. It meant, in their language, and something close to confused prey, creatures that ran toward threats because they hadn't yet processed they were threats. The Vorkai found it equal parts amusing and puzzling. Every species fought, every species struggled, but humans had this particular quality that the Vorkai xenobiologists had flagged in their first contact assessments. They seemed not to have a ceiling on what they'd endure. The clinical term in the hegemony assessment files was maladaptive pain tolerance. What it meant, and on the ground at Theta Corridor, was something different. What it meant was that after 18 hours of continuous engagement, after the Vorkai had deployed their suppression fields, after they had, targeted kind of every command position, after they had done everything that should have produced a collapse in unit cohesion, the human line hadn't moved. It had bent. God, it had bent. They'd lost ground, lost people, but it hadn't broken. Fleet commander like, Aiteveralis sent a scout report to Senarach that read, in the Vorkai equivalent, of bureaucratic understatement, the humans appear to be operating on a different calculation than anticipated. What Teveralis meant was, we don't understand what they're calculating. Mara, to be fair, had an appointment with the school counselor on Thursdays. Mandatory reintegration check-in, it said on the form. District protocol for returning Accord volunteers. Plus, she sat across from a woman named Ms. Ferraro, who had a small succulent on her desk and reading glasses she wore on a beaded chain around her neck. Ms. Ferraro had clearly read the standard literature. She had the tone of someone who had prepared. The adjustment period is different for everyone, she said. There's no right timeline. Okay. Do you find yourself having trouble with loud noises, crowds? Mara looked at the succulent. It needed water. Just barely. The soil had pulled away from the edges of the pot by a millimeter. But it needed water. Not trouble, Mara said. I just process them differently now. What does that mean for you? She thought about how to explain it. How to explain that loud didn't scare her anymore because she'd redefined loud. That a cafeteria, you know, full of teenagers was, by any measure, she'd recalibrated to quiet. That her nervous system had been reset by 18 months of input that this room, that this town, this school had no vocabulary for. It means I, notice more than I used to, she said. Ms. Ferraro wrote something down. Your succulent is thirsty, Mara didn't say. Tyler Marsh found her at her locker after 6th period. He had the look of someone who had decided to be cool about something. Practiced casualness. She'd learned to read that specific performance in the first week of boot camp, and she'd never unlearned it. Hey, I've been thinking about what Delacourt said. About Theta, basically, corridor. Mara opened her locker. My dad says the Vorkai basically stopped because we got lucky. Like they made a tactical miscalculation and we exploited it. He thinks like it wasn't some big human moment, it was just... What does your dad do? Mara asked. Tyler blinked. He sells commercial real estate. Uh-huh. She pulled out her calculus textbook. So you think it wasn't luck? Tyler said. He'd adjusted, leaning into it now, actually curious under the performance. Mara shut her locker, looked at him directly, which she did rarely because people found it unsettling and she'd stopped caring about that only recently. You know what the Vorkai couldn't model? She said. He waited. That we'd keep going when it stopped making sense to. She adjusted the strap of her bag. Every species they'd ever fought had a breaking point, a calculation. This costs more than we gain. Like they could predict it. They ran the models, applied the pressure to the right places, and the line broke. She paused. We don't break at the point where breaking makes sense. Tyler stared at her. We break later, she said. Or we don't. She walked toward Calc. He stood there for a moment, very still, in the hallway. In the Hegemony archives, there was a 90-second piece of footage captured by a Vorkai drone unit during Hour 22 of the Theta Corridor ground engagement. It showed a single human soldier, armor damaged, left pauldron completely gone, moving, with the particular economy. Of someone who had stopped having feelings about pain, directing 3 others through a collapsed transit corridor. The Vorkai had flagged it because of her face. She wasn't angry, she wasn't terrified. She had the look of someone doing arithmetic, present tense, practical, unglamorous arithmetic. What do I have? What do I need? What's next? You were the xenobiologist who reviewed the footage, wrote one line in the margin of the analysis report. She's already decided she can do this. Not she believes, and not she hopes. She's decided. The Vorkai didn't have a word for that specific thing. They eventually borrowed it from Standard English. The word was grit, which they studied it for 6 months after the ceasefire. Look, they built new models. They ran new simulations. The models, kept producing the same uncomfortable result. A Thursday afternoon, rain. Mara sat on the bleachers after school, alone, watching the JV soccer team run drills. She wasn't sure why. She had nowhere pressing to be. The rain was light, the kind that was more feeling than fact, cool and directionless, and she'd sat in worse. Priya appeared beside her with an umbrella she was apparently willing to share. You don't have in my opinion to, Mara said. Plus, I know. Priya sat down. He'd opened the umbrella over both of them. My mom cooks when she doesn't know what to do. I follow people with umbrellas. Something unlocked in Mara's chest. I mean, small. Plus the size of a coin. She almost smiled. Plus, can I ask you something? Priya said. You're going to anyway. Fair. Priya watched the soccer kids for a second. Were you scared? And over there? Mara was quiet long enough that the question sat between them and became real. Yeah, she said. But you kept going. Yeah. Why? She thought about that. Not the version she would have given in an interview, not the Accord-approved language about duty and solidarity and the human spirit. The actual answer, the one she'd never said out loud. Because the person next to me was still going, she said, and the person next to them, and nobody wanted to be the one who stopped first. She paused. Sort of. It's not heroic. It's just, you're woven in. You can't pull out one thread without everything coming apart. So you don't. Rain on the bleachers. Huh, said Priya softly, which somewhere in a Vorkai military archive in the sealed section accessible only to members of the High Hegemony Council, that exact phenomenon had been documented in 17 separate engagements across 4 months of the Theta Corridor campaign. They had named it Velkethorain. It translated approximately as the weight of the ones beside you, and they had never encountered it before. It terrified them more than any weapon humanity had. Mara went home that night and ate dinner at the kitchen table with her parents, who talked about the neighbor's new car and whether the school board meeting had accomplished anything. Normal sounds, human sounds. She listened to all of it. She was still deciding whether she fit back into it, whether the shape of her, resharpened, reset, or carrying things she hadn't brought home in, any bag, still matched the space that had been waiting. Look, she thought she might, just differently than before. Her mother passed her the salt without being asked, the way she always used to, and Mara took it and thought, yeah, I'm still in here. She just had to find where. The hegemony council chamber was carved from a single piece of Arvos moonstone, 40 meters of pale mineral that had taken 2 generations of Vorkai artisans to hollow into something worthy of decision. The acoustics were designed so that every voice, regardless of register, arrived at every ear with equal weight. Fleet Admiral Senarak stood at the center of it and felt, for the first time in his 3-decade career, that the room wasn't big enough. They didn't retreat, TBH, said Council Elder Yevon, who was old enough to remember the Polari campaign and the Dreshti Accord, and every other clean, comprehensible victory. Even after we compromised their command structure. No, Senarak said. Even after 30% casualties in the forward units. No. Even after we transmitted the standard terms of honorable withdrawal. He paused. They transmitted back, he said, a phrase that our linguistics team initially classified as an error. They thought the translation algorithm had corrupted the file. Silence. What was the phrase? Yevon asked. Senarak looked down at the report in his hands. He had read it 40 times. It didn't improve. Come get some, he said. The chamber was quiet for a long time. Keswick Falls, 6 weeks after the ceasefire. The winter formal was on a Friday. Mara hadn't planned to go. She had planned to sit at home, watch something forgettable, or then let the evening pass the way evenings passed now, without incident, without the particular voltage she'd spent 18 months running on. She was learning to be bored again. It was harder than it sounded. Priya had other ideas, and "You're going," Priya said, in the tone of someone issuing operational orders while pretending she wasn't. I already told my mom I needed the car. I don't have anything to wear. I have 6 things you can borrow and you look good in green. Mara looked at her. You survived a war, Priya said. You can survive for what it's worth, a gym decorated with streamers. There was no real argument to be made against that. The gym was, in fact, decorated with streamers and balloon arches, which and a DJ who was either 17 or very enthusiastically looked it, playing music at a volume that Mara's new nervous system filed under loud but not dangerous, without any particular drama. She stood near the back wall with a plastic cup of punch that tasted like someone had described fruit to the recipe, and she watched. There was, in my opinion, something she'd forgotten about humans at rest. Humans with nothing at stake. Humans not building perimeters or calculating sight lines or weighing the cost of the next 3 minutes. There was something almost shocking about it. The pure, extravagant waste of worrying about nothing important. Whether your dress looked right, whether that person across the room was looking at you, whether the song was good, she used to find it trivial. She'd been wrong. It was sacred, she thought, which the specific luxury of small concerns. She'd, for what it's worth, fought to keep it possible, and here it was. Here they all were, exercising it, spending it like money they didn't know they had. Good, she thought. In my opinion, good. Plus, Tyler Marsh materialized beside her in the way that large, mildly awkward people often materialized, slightly too close, slightly too aware of being slightly too close. Hey! Hey! He stood there for a beat. 2. So I looked into it, after what you said, about the Vorkai models. She looked at him sideways. There's this analyst, Hegemony Institute. They released a paper after the ceasefire, and she said the Vorkai ran their predictive engagement models 47 times before committing to Theta Corridor. He paused. And in 47 simulations, humans broke by hour 16. How many hours did we actually run? 31. Mara sipped her punch. My dad still says it was luck, Tyler said. He didn't say it like he believed it anymore. Luck runs out, Mara said. Nah, stubbornness doesn't care about the math. He stood there processing that. She could see him actually thinking, not performing the thinking, actually doing it. And she revised her opinion of him upward a small but genuine amount. Can I ask you something dumb? He said. Sure. Were you ever tempted to just stop? Over there? The DJ dropped into something slower. The crowd reshuffled around them. I mean, every hour, she said. That's not the I guess. Interesting question. What's the interesting question? Why didn't I? He waited. Because I was curious, she said. I wanted to know what happened next. She shrugged, one shoulder. I've always been a terrible quitter. My mom used to say I'd argue with a wall until the wall backed down. A pause. Turns out that's a military asset. Tyler laughed, a real one, surprised out of him. Mara felt the coin-sized thing in her, chest open up a little more. In the Hegemony Council chamber, Ansenarak was still standing at the center of 40 meters of moonstone, and the meeting had been going on for 6 hours, and they hadn't yet reached a conclusion. This was unusual. The Vorkai didn't, to be fair, have long meetings. The Terran Accord has made contact, said Councillor Drevnas, who oversaw external relations and had the pinched look of someone who hadn't slept. They are requesting a formal negotiation session. To what end? Yevon asked. Peace, pretty much. At terms. We are the ones who attacked them, Yevon said. Yes, Drevnas said. And they are requesting peace terms. Yes. Not reparations, not territorial claim, not peace terms, I guess, Drevnas said. They sent a single representative. Plus, she landed at the outer station an hour ago. He paused. She is 22 years old. The chamber absorbed this. They sent a child, Yevon said. They sent a veteran, Senarak said quietly. And there's a difference. Ambassador Lena Cho had been at Theta Corridor for 9 of the 31 hours. She had a scar that ran along, her left jaw that she hadn't bothered to have treated. Because as she'd explained to the Accord negotiation team, it was hers, and she was keeping it. She sat across Look, from 3 senior Vorkai counselors at a table in the outer station meeting chamber, and she drank the tea they'd provided, which tasted, she privately noted, are like warm pencils. And she waited. The Vorkai didn't make their guests wait. They were testing. She knew they were testing. She waited, anyway, relaxed, the way you learned to be relaxed when you'd learned that tension was a resource and you only spent it when necessary. After 9 minutes, Councillor Drevnas said, You are the human representative. I'm, Lena said. You are young. I'm the right age, she said pleasantly. We sent experience, not seniority. A different metric. A pause and something shifted behind Drevnas's eyes that she couldn't fully read yet. You actually are here to discuss peace terms. I'm here to discuss what comes after peace terms, she said. The actually terms themselves are simple. And what are they? You leave the Theta Corridor systems. You return the 2 stations. You give us access to your hegemony scale assessment so we can understand exactly how badly you underestimated us. She smiled, small and genuine. That last one's for science. Plus, we're curious. Drevnas stared at her. Those are your terms, he said. That's it. You aren't demanding compensation? Territorial guarantee, to be fair, which you made no claim on the... We don't want your space, Lena said. We have plenty of our own and we're still figuring out what to do with it. She set down the pencil tea. We want you to understand what happened. Kind of clearly. So honestly, it doesn't happen again. And what happened, Drevnos said carefully, in your assessment? Lena looked at him. You decided we were class 4, she said, and we were offended. She let that sit. That's it? Drevnos asked. That's it, she said. You made us feel like we didn't matter and we spent 31 hours proving otherwise. She paused. We're like that. It's a documented phenomenon. Push us into a corner and we don't calculate what's survivable. We just push back. It's genuinely not strategic. It's almost embarrassing how unsophisticated it is. She didn't sound embarrassed. You should know that going forward, she said. The math you're doing? What will it take to make them quit? The answer is variable and deeply personal, and we've never, as a species, fully agreed on it. Which means, I think, you can't model it. She tilted her head. Doesn't that drive you crazy? Drevnos was quiet for a long time. Yes, he said. Honestly. A first honest thing he'd said. Good, Lena said. Then we're starting from the same place. Keswick Falls. 8 weeks after the ceasefire, Mara was in Calc when the notification came through. Formal accord ratified, which Vorkai hegemony. Pretty much, Theta Corridor systems returned. She felt her phone buzz in her pocket and didn't reach for it, because that was rude during class, and she was trying to relearn what was rude, what was normal, but what were the rules of this smaller theater she was moving through. She would look later. She already knew what it said anyway. She'd known, the way you knew things sometimes, when you'd been close enough to something to feel its shape, that it was going to hold, that Lena was going to do it. That the Vorkai were going to sit across the table and find, on the other side of it, something they hadn't prepared for. Someone who wasn't afraid of them, and wasn't performing bravery. Just someone doing the arithmetic. What do I have? What do I need? What's next? Mr. Delacourt was saying something about the Treaty of Westphalia. She half listened and let her mind go where it wanted. She thought about Theta Corridor, and she thought about Hour 22, and the collapsed transit corridor, and the 3 people she'd moved through it, and the specific quality of their breathing in her ears. Ragged, present, or still going. That had been the most important sound she'd ever heard. She thought about Priya and the umbrella in the rain. She thought about Tyler, actually thinking. She thought about her mother passing the salt. She was still here. She was still woven in, differently, reshaped, recalibrated, carrying a weight distribution that would never quite go back to what it had been, but in. The thread hadn't pulled out. Plus, in the sealed section of the Hegemony Archive, the final entry on the Theta Corridor incident was filed by Fleet Admiral Senna Rock on the day the accord was ratified. He wasn't by nature a reflective writer. His reports were actually efficient, technical, stripped of anything that could be called feeling. 4 decades of documentation in that same voice. Honestly, this one was different. The xenobiological classification of humanity as Class 4 remains in the record. I'm recommending pretty much it be formally revised, and which not to Class 6 or 7, which would suggest a species that simply has more firepower than we modeled. The classification system wasn't built for what we encountered. The Polari had firepower. Pretty much, they surrendered. The Dreshti had numbers, which they collapsed. The humans had 31 hours and the apparent inability to agree, even internally, on a moment to stop. I spoke with their ambassador after the accord signing. She was polite and seemed genuinely pleased with the outcome. She drank the tea without complaint. She asked if I'd ever tried a food called a pretzel. When I said I didn't, she said I was missing out. I don't know what a pretzel is. I have requested the information. What I know is this. We built our models on the assumption that all species calculate the price of survival. We are wrong, which humans don't calculate. They decide. The distinction isn't semantic. It is the entire variable we failed to include. In 400 years of expansion, we've never encountered a species that confused stubbornness with strategy and won. I'm recommending a full moratorium on Terran engagement planning. Not because they are stronger than us, because they don't know the difference between possible and impossible, and they'ven't, in any engagement I have studied, let the impossible stop them. This makes them unpredictable in the way that weather is unpredictable. For you can model weather. You can't stop it. I'd like to try the pretzel first, if that is acceptable. Senarak, Fleet Admiral, Vorkai Hegemony filed, Day 1 of the Theta Accord, if that makes sense. Mara walked home through early December cold, hands in her jacket pockets, breath making small clouds in the gray Keswick Falls air. She passed the coffee shop, the hardware store, the elementary school, basically, and with the chain-link fence that had one section loose at the bottom because the neighborhood kids used it as a shortcut and no one had ever fixed it. Same, all the same. The war had happened, plus the war was over. The world had shifted on something it didn't even have a name for yet. The weird, specific, slightly embarrassing human habit of not stopping when stopping would make sense. She turned onto her street. Her house was at the end of it, lights on in the kitchen. She was almost there. I guess, Vorkai never attacked again. They did eventually try the pretzel. Senarak's review called it aggressively salted, which his diplomatic liaison quietly noted was, for Vorkai, a compliment. Humanity, characteristically, didn't notice the compliment. They were already somewhere else, already building the next thing, already arguing about what was possible. Nobody had told them there was a ceiling, so they never looked for it.